Let's start with a brief summary. This article, written by Paul Graham in 2005, discusses the transformation of the corporate ladder concept. Graham talks about the attitude of the new generation that prefers developing their own products and selling them to large companies instead of slowly rising in a traditional company. He notes that this change has created the impression of rapidly increasing economic inequality, but the situation is not as different in reality. While emphasizing the value and security of the corporate ladder, Graham states that the new model involves more risk but is more effective. Before we dive in, I want to share a quick note about how this podcast is created. As you've probably noticed, this podcast isn't voiced by a human, but by artificial intelligence. I'm obligated to inform you of this beforehand due to the rules of AI services. This podcast is made possible by our sponsor, Wope.com, an AI startup that combines content marketing with artificial intelligence to significantly boost traffic and revenue of your startups. For all the latest content, be sure to follow me at x.com Yigit Konur. Now let's turn our attention back to the essay. Adapting to the New Economy, The End of the Corporate Ladder. Original title, After the Ladder. Date, August 2005. 30 years ago, one was supposed to work one's way up the corporate ladder. That's less the rule now. Our generation wants to get paid up front. Instead of developing a product for some big company in the expectation of getting job security in return, we develop the product ourselves in a startup and sell it to the big company. At the very least, we want options. Among other things, this shift has created the appearance of a rapid increase in economic inequality. But really, the two cases are not as different as they look in economic statistics. Economic statistics are misleading because they ignore the value of safe jobs. An easy job from which one can't be fired is worth money. Exchanging the two is one of the commonest forms of corruption. A sinecure is in effect an annuity. Except sinecures don't appear in economic statistics. If they did, it would be clear that in practice socialist countries have non-trivial disparities of wealth because they usually have a class of powerful bureaucrats who are paid mostly by seniority and can never be fired. While not a sinecure, a position on the corporate ladder was genuinely valuable because big companies tried not to fire people and promoted from within based largely on seniority. A position on the corporate ladder had a value analogous to the goodwill that is a very real element in the valuation of companies. It meant one could expect future high-paying jobs. One of the main causes of the decay of the corporate ladder is the trend for takeovers that began in the 1980s. Why waste your time climbing a ladder that might disappear before you reach the top? And, by no coincidence, the corporate ladder was one of the reasons the early corporate raiders were so successful. It's not only economic statistics that ignore the value of safe jobs. Corporate balance sheets do too. One reason it was profitable to carve up 1980s companies and sell them for parts was that they hadn't formally acknowledged their implicit debt to employees who had done good work and expected to be rewarded with high-paying executive jobs when their time came. In the movie Wall Street, Gordon Gekko ridicules a company overloaded with vice presidents, but the company may not be as corrupt as it seems. Those VPs' cushy jobs were probably payment for work done earlier. I like the new model better. For one thing, it seems a bad plan to treat jobs as rewards. Plenty of good engineers got made into bad managers that way. And the old system meant people had to deal with a lot more corporate politics in order to protect the work they'd invested in a position on the ladder. The big disadvantage of the new system is that it involves more risk, inequality.html. If you develop ideas in a startup instead of within a big company, any number of random factors could sink you before you can finish. But maybe the older generation would laugh at me for saying that the way we do things is riskier. After all, projects within big companies were always getting canceled as a result of arbitrary decisions from higher up. My father's entire industry, breeder reactors, disappeared that way. For better or worse, the idea of the corporate ladder is probably gone for good. The new model seems more liquid and more efficient, but it is less of a change financially than one might think. Our fathers weren't that stupid.